Manhwa title in the right corner of the screen. Enjoy watching.
It was Liliana. She just marveled at magic. She, against her, was a man of angelic appearance. Francois Cassel, 23 years old, a talented mage and the current head of the Magic Tower. With that cute face, he asked Liliana to call him Appa. Francois is her older sister Emily's fiancé, and they signed a prenuptial agreement. Liliana tried to refuse it. After all, he is a son-in-law to her, not Appa. Besides, she already has Oppa. But Francois didn't care, not family, so he already saw her as a little sister. Liliana tried in every way to avoid him. Although, with a gentle face like an angel, Francois showed kindness to her. But she avoided him because she was scared. He is one of those main characters who played the role of a madman, lost his mind due to his innate insanity, and pushed Liliana, a regular supporting character, to the brink of death. This was the case in the original story. Liliana Berchio, you might say, has been reborn. She's not sure what to call the phenomenon she's encountered. A month ago, when she ran a high fever, the contents of the dystopian reverse harem romance kept running through my mind. The plot is about the male protagonist going to war just to win the heart of this protagonist girl. Except she was the one who never trusted her heart to anyone. Liliana was running away from Francois and, as usual, tripped due to her clumsiness. But this time she didn't fall because her second son-in-law picked her up. This guy is very attentive and caring. His name is Leopold von Valtraken, 25 years old, commander of the Knights. He is one of the main characters in the original story and the world's strongest warrior. Liliana has an older sister, Regina, and Leopold just so happens to have married her after a period of unrequited love ended. However, Liliana has two more sisters, and here is another brother-in-law of Liliana's. He was always joking around and making fun of her. His name is Marius von Kemmelhofen, 26 years old, is the annoying and frustrating last main character, and is married to the most favorite older sister, Alice. However, despite his character and behavior in the original story, he was a tyrant emperor with a mad obsession. But now he teases Liliana like a little kid, calling her short every time he sees her. Still, the youngest son-in-law, who was a crazy villain, tries to win her favor by showing his true loyalty in the story. The middle son-in-law with an impassive face subtly hints at being the #1 son-in-law. And the older son-in-law, famed for his obsession in the original, teases Liliana every time. But on top of that, Liliana seems to have a stalker. It's Edgar, Marius's younger brother. Liliana wanted to stay away from him as much as possible. He annoyed her as much as her older son-in-law. But Edgar thought they were soulmates and should always be together, so he followed her around every day. Liliana had hoped for the original story to take a different turn, but she did nothing to make it happen, and it ended up coming to this on its own somehow. Where is the real female protagonist, Rebecca Marchione, and what does she do after all? In the original novel, Rebecca didn't even have the power to change the course of history, being preoccupied with her own problems. But this time, Rebecca herself changed history. She died too soon and right in front of Liliana. However, a little earlier that day, Liliana had met Rebecca for the first time. This girl was very beautiful and sweet. Although this world is a dystopian novel, meeting the female protagonist while celebrating aboard a ship was an eerily unusual experience. The plot, which struck Liliana like lightning during a fever a month ago, is as follows. RBC's protagonist leaves his hometown of Travancia and travels to the Empire for revenge. There she randomly meets the male protagonists and wins their love. They in turn, using their own powers, are desperate to conquer her. However, she manipulates them into starting a war. This has turned her hometown into a sea of flames. In the process, the victim and becomes none other than Berchio's family. The oldest sister Alice died in battle. Travancia lost the war. Liliana, the youngest sister, was taken to the Empire as a prisoner. So until she learned the plot of the original story, she was just an ordinary girl of 6 years old. Plus, since the story ends when she turns 15, her mental age isn't particularly great either. Even now, Liliana can't remember her past life. For a normal 6-year-old, the information rushed into her head like she'd been struck by lightning, and now Liliana didn't know how to act. Of course, she wanted to do something to prevent the situation from unfolding like in the original, but she didn't really know if she had been reborn or if she had just been absorbed into this body, and that was scary. But the important thing was that she knew the future. The first time they met, Rebecca wanted to somehow bond with this shy girl and even gave her chocolate, which is very hard to find. And Rebecca even asked her older sister if it was okay to stroke Liliana's head just once, since it was their first time meeting. Liliana and her sisters didn't mind. So of course Rebecca stroked the girl's head. Then she quietly apologized for everything. It was so quiet that no one but Liliana could hear, but the girl didn't know what it was about. Rebecca asked what Liliana's dream was. She just wanted to live happily with her sisters, and she didn't need more than that. It was a beautiful dream, and Rebecca promised that it would definitely happen. Rebecca said that with some sadness and wished Liliana a healthy growth. Then the girl thought that Rebecca wasn't such a bad character after all. They could get along. But that night, someone fell overboard. Despite a month-long search, the body was never found, and it was concluded that she was dead. That person was Rebecca. That's how the original story ended before it even began. Even the Berkio family sisters who helped with the investigation were confused. But no one was as disturbed as Liliana. The girl didn't understand why this happened, because now that the main character was dead, what would happen to the original story? It had been a month since that situation, and everything was normal. Liliana lived the same life as before, even though she knew the future. Liliana was still a child. She didn't like vegetables in her food as much as before, liked to play with her sisters, and was afraid when they scolded her. Liliana has 3 older sisters and 1 older brother. The tired and scowling man is Sister Amelia in the original. When war broke out and Liliana was taken to the Empire as a prisoner, it was Amelia who worked tirelessly to rescue her sister and even infiltrated the palace to help. The second sister, Regina, she is a twin and was born 7 minutes later than her. Regina is kind and her food is the best. And finally, the most beloved big sister is Alice. Kind, caring, beautiful, and elegant. In other words, the most incredible person in the world. There is also an older brother, Andrea, but he left suddenly for the countryside without any warning, so he doesn't live with the sisters now. Liliana misses him. Now that she knows content she can't tell her sisters about, and the sisters can't understand her feelings, there's nothing she can do about it. Due to the death of the female protagonist, Rebecca, the events of the original story never began. The war only broke out because the male protagonists were obsessed with Rebecca. But if she's gone now, then maybe we don't have to worry about that. Liliana, upon meeting, Dasha told Rebecca that she only wishes for one thing: to always share delicious food with her family, to live happily and get along well with each other so that no one dies. The real main character that was supposed to rob Liliana of that happiness is gone. Only the crazy main characters are left. But if this continues, Liliana will just live her life as it is now, and most likely never meet those guys. After all, the story will start 6 years later when Liliana is 12. She forgot about everything and just enjoyed life and the delicious food. But the tranquility gradually began to be disturbed. Amelia called the little girl to go out together. She said they would be shopping for cute clothes, but they did that last week, so they don't need anything. Liliana showed up. It's a weird feeling. Every time Amelia says something like that, it ends with Lily being tricked into going to the hospital for a shot. Now she thought the same thing would happen, but she couldn't refuse. And when she and her sister went for a walk, they came to a certain establishment. Liliana got excited because she definitely wasn't being brought in for a vaccination. They were here to meet some incredibly handsome guy. Lily was fascinated by him until Emily called his name. Francois Cassel. Liliana froze with fear. She looked at her sister hopefully. Something was wrong, but it wasn't a mistake. Francois Cassel is a skilled magician and the head of the Magic Tower. The one who in the original story took on the role of the insane protagonist. And he locked Rebecca in the tower and assigned Liliana as her maid. And now for some reason, Amelia has arranged a meeting with him? Francois greeted Emily with his sweet smile. It was their first meeting and acquaintance. Liliana was so scared because she didn't expect it to happen so quickly, because it would be at least 6 years before the original story began. However, the main characters have already started to appear. Lily wanted to get out of here with her sister as soon as possible, even though she didn't know how these two knew each other or why they wanted to meet. But Francois was beyond dangerous. Each of the original's main male protagonists has his own crazy side. The Emperor, willing to do anything for the heroine, is obsessed with her. The commander of the knights, Leopold, is a strong man who willingly surrendered to the heroine because of his crazy loyalty. But unlike these two, who were famous for their abnormal love, Francois, the Lord of the Magic Tower, was gripped by true madness. Moreover, his madness is like a time bomb that is ready to explode at any moment, which makes encounters with him even more dangerous. Amelia didn't look scared at all. She didn't seem to care about the guy, but she was the one who'd written him the letter. She had sent him a paper on the relationship between ancient magic and supernatural abilities. It was very hard to get, and Francois, of course, was very grateful for it. He came here because of his interest in learning about supernatural abilities, for it is a unique power that only the natives of Travancia possess. Though the magi of the continent rushed to study it, Travancia maintained a strict policy of isolationism, making research impossible and direct observation even more difficult. So the mages were desperately looking for notes on abilities, and Amelia found the information and passed it on to Francois, even though they weren't even acquainted. Somehow he got here, breaking through the Coast Guard, and asked Miss Berchia what she wanted. Liliana was ready to defend her sister, but she occasionally lost her temper when she looked at this beautiful, handsome Francois. Emily didn't react. Amelia showed Francois her little sister. Liliana is 6 years old, but she looks 4 years old. All because she was born prematurely at only 7 months, so her body is very weak. She gets a fever when she's surprised, and just coughing in cold air can lead to pneumonia. While talking about all this, Amelia wanted only one thing, and Francois immediately realized they wanted to use healing magic. Amelia has studied this area well, and knows that if one drinks a magical remedy arranged similarly to holy magic and mana structure, one can increase the healing effects by 5 times. Even if there's nothing special about it, it will promote cell division and growth in children, making them healthier. Francois was increasingly amazed at Amelia's intelligence, which was enviable even though she wasn't even a mage. While they were discussing all this, Liliana realized with fear that the main reason Emily had met this mad Francois was because of her illness. Lily meant it was all her own fault, so she decided to stop it immediately and told her sister that she wanted to go outside because it was very stuffy. But Amelia didn't fall for that. She just asked the waiter to bring orange juice to calm her sister down. Liliana didn't know what to do. It wouldn't work. It would do no good if her sister contacted Francois. It would be very dangerous, and it wouldn't do any good. Now that the situation had gotten this far, there was no turning back, so Liliana decided to juice herself. Sure, it looked like an accident, but all eyes were finally paying attention. Now Liliana has sticky hands and clothes, so they have to go home and wash it all off. Lily exhaled a sigh of relief, for it would help her avoid Francois, but when she glimpsed in his direction, she noticed, for some reason, he was looking at her so intently. He had his usual smile on his face, but his gaze was different, as if he could see right through Lily. In the evening, already at home, Liliana asked her sister if she planned to go out with that guy again. He was handsome, of course, but very bad. However, Amelia was still going to continue going to meetings with him so that Liliana would be healthier. It was all for her own good, and it was actually very hard to get him to come. Liliana was desperate. She didn't know how to explain to her sister that this man was incredibly dangerous, more dangerous than she could imagine. With the main character gone, if anything happens to her sister because of this Francois, Liliana will hate herself. The next day, Lily and her sister Regina finally went to the playground. Liliana finally felt happy. She really liked it here. After all, it had been a long time since she had been to the playground. After that incident with Rebecca, Lily came down with a high fever for a while. The shock crushed her, making her feel physically ill, and she was bedridden and couldn't even leave the house. This meant that she had to quit her daycare center. Sitting at home was unbearable. She felt depressed and missed her friends so much. Francesco, Martin, Antonio. She really wanted to see them, but she couldn't. As much as the sisters tried to cheer her up and replace her friends, they weren't very good at it, so they eventually decided to take her out to the playground. Liliana, having reached the long-awaited playground, started having fun. From the bottom of her heart, thanks to the entertainment, she was forgetting all her worries. It was a lot of fun. Being cooped up at home was painful and depressing, but she was also worried that her sisters would meet the main characters from the original. But now, on the playground, Liliana's only thought was to swing higher on the swings. She swung as hard as she could, but it still wasn't enough. It would be ideal if someone pushed her from behind, but the other sister was knitting and sitting far away, so she certainly couldn't do that. Suddenly, Liliana flew as high as she wanted to go. When she turned around, she realized that someone had nudged her. She didn't know who it was, but whoever he was, he caught the perfect moment to do it, so Liliana just enjoyed it. The man realized she was having fun and wanted to fly even higher, so she asked for it. He spared no effort in rocking her the way she wanted him to. It was Liliana's first time flying so high. She wouldn't have been able to swing that far on her own. It was incredible. But at that moment, she was so relaxed, feeling the lightness of flight, that she accidentally let go of the swing. Liliana didn't immediately realize what was happening. It was a strange feeling, as if everything was floating in front of her eyes. Then she realized that she was falling, and from such a high height her life would surely be cut short. Just like that. Regina immediately ran to catch her sister, but she didn't make it in time even though she was close. Someone else managed to pick Liliana up as she was about to say goodbye to her life. She opened her eyes and saw some cute guy. I'm surprised he caught her in time. Regina immediately ran up to her sister. She was so nervous that she even started crying and asked about her condition. Liliana was thankfully perfectly fine, but she felt very sorry because her sister had been so badly frightened. Liliana herself didn't understand why her arms suddenly went limp. The man who had been rocking her all this time was also very frightened. She began to fall so suddenly that he thought she was going to die. The man who picked her up said there was no need to worry, and the girl was perfectly safe. Then the blonde man was able to exhale a sigh of relief, and he thanked Leo for his excellent response. Hearing a familiar name, Leo and Marius. Liliana almost stopped breathing. Not long ago, her older sister had gotten involved, and now there was Leopold and Marius. Regina finally stopped crying and immediately yelled at the man who was rocking the little baby so hard. Now Regina, who was usually as gentle as a spring breeze, was very angry, but Marius is always so carefree. However, if something goes wrong, he turns into an angry beast. He could be angry right now. Besides, Regina blamed him and thanked the other man Leo very much because thanks to him, her sister was completely safe. Liliana tried to stop her sister before Marius could get angry, but suddenly the man himself started apologizing. Lily even began to tremble from shock. It was very surprising. In the original novel, he had always been a simple and sympathetic man. It wasn't until he met the protagonist that he started going crazy. But now he's fine. He even respectfully apologized to the resident of Trovancia, even though he takes the place of the emperor. Liliana began to calm her sister down. Regina finally started acting like herself. She thanked the man for catching her sister and everything ended safely. This man, Leopold, he's really huge. He said it was okay and just did what he had to do. In the original, he was referred to as a master swordsman who trained his body to the limit, later becoming the commander that led the Empire of Trovancia to victory. Liliana was anxious around him, but she couldn't say she was afraid. After all, if it hadn't been for him, she would probably be dead by now, so she was grateful to him for saving her. Marius stood back, feeling guilty, but he was just in awe of this sweet and adorable girl. Regina wanted to give Leo something in return, but he kept refusing like a noble knight. And so Marius said that, actually, as a thank you, it would be nice if she would be there. Regina and Leo looked at Marius with disapproval because it was a ridiculous offer. Asking to be a tour guide like that? They should have just accepted the thanks and left it at that. But Marius started talking about how hard it was to travel through Trovancia, and even getting here was incredibly difficult. So they want to learn about a few things. Regina isn't that stupid and naive, she didn't want to agree. After all, if Marius had any conscience at all, he wouldn't ask for such a thing. Marius realized that he was definitely not going to get anywhere on his own, so he asked Leo to tell him that he wanted to do it himself. Leo didn't want to drag this sweet girl down, but he liked her so much that he wanted to spend some more time with her, and said that if possible, he would like to shamelessly ask her for help. They both seemed to like each other, so Regina agreed and they were both happy. But Liliana was wary. She didn't know what to do. No one about this messed with broken protagonists. Marius's arrival here meant that a meeting with his older sister had been planned. Since she was part of the Imperial Guard, she would be responsible for escorting the Emperor. The situation had turned in that direction, so Liliana decided to take matters into her own hands, and she agreed to be the guide of these men today, along with her sister. This way, she was going to change her strategy. I'm going to make sure that everyone, the main characters in her family, become friends instead of enemies. So, along with that, Lily changed her strategy and became the two main characters along with her sister for one day. Even though Regina has stopped being angry, she still completely ignores Marius, who put the younger one in danger. When Marius asked some questions to find out more about the place, Regina ignored him completely, focusing her attention only to the left. But thankfully, Marius didn't care much about that. He just guffawed. Of course, unlike being around Francois, who was like a time bomb, Liliana felt somewhat more at ease with these men as she decided to become friends with them. They walked along the coast for a long time, and then they went for a snack. Liliana was already very tired, and she sighed with such heaviness that Marius couldn't help but laugh at it. A miniature Thumbelina? He asked how old she was. Liliana was 6 now, and she thought she was already big. but that was just an excuse to make fun of her. If she was only 6 years old, she was definitely a child. She asked how old he looked. Marius made his prettiest expression and asked how old he looked. Liliana really fell for the good looks. Leopold and Francois are good-looking, but Marius is also incredibly handsome, like a sculpture, especially if you look at him not from the bottom up, but from across the room. He certainly has reasons to be the main character, and Liliana found it hard to resist the pretty faces. But still he annoyed her so much, so she said he looked 550 years old. Marius began to resent it because he couldn't possibly look that old. He even allowed her to talk informally to get close. Liliana was surprised since he was an emperor, but hadn't revealed his identity yet, and still she said he looked 5,550 years old. Marius hoped that even if she was that age, he'd still be on top of it. Of course that's true, but Lily couldn't admit it and said that Mr. Leo was much prettier anyway. Is Mr. Marius as cool as Leo? Honestly, it was a little insulting. Marius asked the little girl, taking a closer look, because there was no such thing. But she insisted, and Leo calmed Marius down. He even liked the situation. In any case, Marius knew he was the most beautiful man among all the 5,550-year-olds. Regina laughed at the situation and was glad her sister had such good taste. She was in complete agreement that Leo was much prettier. The knight blushed as red as a tomato, and Marius, sitting on the sidelines, was already laughing heartily. Soon the food finally arrived. People from the Empire prefer meat food, so Regina ordered a lot of meat. Liliana was very happy about this, as she was finally able to get the kids' lunch at this super cool place. After a long walk with these two, he needed to eat quickly and regain his strength. Another visitor came to the place, and it seemed like nothing, but Leo immediately noticed. He notices a man he knows is here. It's Francois. But why is he here? Liliana hoped she had heard the name, but when she shifted her gaze, she realized she hadn't heard it. She saw the frightening man. Francois came to the table and asked why the two were in Travancia so early. He came here early because he had other things to do, but they didn't have anything to do. Liliana regretted begging her sisters to go outside and play on the playground, and they ended up in this situation, bringing all the main characters together in one place. Marius and Leo said they had come here a few days earlier to see the sights, and these nice girls showed the town. They noticed that the little girl had become pale and droopy. Liliana really thought it was a bad day. Francois, seeing her, greeted her and mentioned that they had met again. That was the worst thing he could have said, and it was bad for him to show up here at all. Liliana was really afraid of him. In the original novel, not only did he imprison Rebecca in the tower, but he also forced Liliana, who was dragged into the Empire as a prisoner, to become her maid. She ended up being locked up as well. Even when the heroine refused to eat properly, Francois poisoned Liliana with a substance that required regular use of an antidote to avoid an agonizing and vain death. He could only provide the antidote in small quantities, only enough for the second half of the day, and Francois would only do so if Rebecca ate well. Rebecca, out of guilt for Liliana's undeserved suffering, forced herself to eat despite the nausea and vomiting. It was horrible. Liliana really felt intimidated around Francois. She greeted him, and Regina wondered how they already knew each other. Francois only now recognized that the girl sitting next to him was Liliana's older sister. So she was Emily's sister too. Regina asked how Francois knew Liliana after all. He realized that Amelia hadn't told him anything, so he decided not to hide anything and said she'd made a contract with him for Lily's health. But when Regina asked for details, he couldn't say anything about it. Everyone is like that. The contract was with another sister. Regina was angry that her sister hadn't told anyone. Only when she got home would she be able to ask Amelia about it. Liliana was so scared and didn't want to eat at all anymore. She didn't really know what kind of contract Amelia had made with Francois either, but she really hoped that no one would get hurt because of it. Francois watched Liliana closely for some reason, and then even decided to ride along with them and eat. He told Regina that he would ask Emily about the details when he got home, because similar sisters have secrets from each other. It was better to make such decisions in consultation. Regina was even angrier. She was grateful that Francois had mentioned it, but angry because Amelia hadn't said anything, and Liliana hadn't said anything either. Meanwhile, Amelia didn't realize what was happening at all and quietly went about her business. When evening came, Liliana found herself falling asleep. When she woke up, someone was carrying her on a big, broad back. Marius immediately noticed that the little girl was awake. The atmosphere seemed to be getting better. After eating, they continued walking. But after playing on the beach, Liliana was very tired and fell asleep. so Leo carried her on his back so she didn't even lead. Francois did not go out with them, for he had other work to do. He only ate with them. It was already evening, so Leopold and Marius walked the girls home, thus ending the journey. Still, before parting ways, Leopold asked Regina if she would mind if he asked her to accompany him again. Marius laughed out loud and immediately noticed the relationship ripening between them. Liliana stepped on his foot and told him to stop. And he began ruffling her hair, repeating her words in a squeaky voice. Liliana was already starting to get angry. She said not to mock, but Marius wasn't going to stop. While that loving couple stood aside, Liliana and Marius didn't disturb them. But Marius was so nasty and annoyed Liliana so much. He laughed at how small she was, and even when she tried to insult him, he wasn't offended, and that made her even angrier. She kept talking about how she wasn't little anymore, but not recognizing the fact that she was little was very inherent in a child. And when Marius said that, Liliana could no longer resist him. She ended up crying, and her sister immediately rushed to Lily. Marius, of course, tried to calm the girl and admit his guilt, but it didn't help much. Liliana promised that if she ever got big and strong, she would hit Marius first. After that, they finally went home. Leo didn't expect Marius to be able to bring a child to tears, but Marius thought it was even cute. And actually, he was the reason Leo was able to arrange to see Regina again. Marius noticed right away that Leo seems to be head over heels in love with that girl at first sight. He can't help it when he runs into the girl. If the knights working for him saw this, they would go crazy and think it was a dream. Marius was already imagining how he would tell everyone about it, just for fun. Getting lost and going into the playground was destined to happen anyway. They had a good time that day. When the trip to Travancia for negotiations was confirmed, he had arrived there a few days earlier to settle some business. The government seemed to be concerned about the free movement of two people without any escort. But for Swordmaster Leopold, known as the human weapon, and Marius, who took the throne after a bloody conflict with his brothers and the rest of his family, their abilities were already at a level where they didn't need an escort. So the men set out on their journey through Travancia without fear or apprehension. But they did not know that they would be in the hands of a man who could show them the way. They both didn't know where they should go, so they decided to just keep walking and maybe stumble upon something interesting. The emperor noticed that the standard of living here was very good, better than he had expected. If a war were to break out now with Travancia, that empire, it would suffer huge losses. Plus, with over 30% of the population being psychic, this country definitely can't be ignored. Travancia is rich, beautiful, and peaceful. The climate is mild, and abundance is an essential ingredient. This is why Travancia is an isolated place where not everyone is allowed in. It was hard for the emperor to restrain himself. What conqueror could resist the lust to get his hands on this place? To establish diplomatic relations here instead of conquest would guarantee the empire a considerable fortune. Marius and Leo continued walking, and suddenly they heard the loud, joyful cry of a child. They didn't think there was a playground in a place like this. It was noticeable that the kids here were cheerful, and Marius was curious to get a closer look. But when he walked over and saw the face of the girl who was riding the swing, he immediately knew who it was. She had the same face as her older brother. One day when Marius met Andrea, he says he's going to die soon, so all Marius has to do is bring Bertio's baby. Marius remembered it only now, and he remembered that he had learned before he had been sent here that there was a late-born child in the Bertio family, the youngest daughter of this prestigious political family. But then, why did Andrea Bertio move to the countryside? He was a promising politician in his prime, threw everything on, and went to the countryside. It was quite unexpected. While Leo was pondering this, Marius was long gone. The moment Marius saw the girl, the thought crossed his mind. Why had he left such a sweet, smiling child to suffer so much? Marius once made a vow to Andrea, and that vow will stand even if time turns back. Marius had sworn to protect Andrea's beloved sisters. Now, just seeing this girl, he immediately realized who she was and decided to have a little fun with her. Keeping this promise was really important to Marius because it was the only way he could redeem himself. When night fell, Regina and Amelia were finally able to talk. Regina was very angry because Amelia hadn't told the other sisters anything about the contract she had made. Amelia apologized, of course, but she tried to convince her sisters that it was a great opportunity if someone like Francois Cassel, a genius magician, could help Lily. Regina understood everything perfectly well, but she thought otherwise. From her sister, Regina said that Lily was not a lab rat and you can't feed her anything. Amelia isn't that stupid. She has all the evidence on paper. She's thought it through. Lily listened to her sisters fighting and realized that it was her own fault. If she'd been healthier, the sisters wouldn't have fought so much. Lily was just hiding in her room, waiting for her older sister to come and calm the twins down. When she shows up, the twins will immediately stop fighting, because Sister Alice is the strongest woman in the world. Liliana fell asleep thinking about it, and in the morning she was awakened by Amelia. She was in a hurry and said that they had to go to a place again today. Liliana wanted nothing more than to sleep some more, but Amelia wouldn't even give her a chance to go back to sleep. The girls quickly got ready and ate breakfast. Liliana finally asked her sister where they were going to go. Amelia reminded her of that handsome man with the silver hair and said they were on their way to meet him. Only Lily was scared again. She so didn't want that and started lying that she was hurting and would have to stay home. Amelia said that if she lied now, she would be reprimanded by Alice. Even with such a threat, Lily continued to lie to stay home and lie in bed. But eventually, Amelia's assertive stare still made Lily give in and stop lying. Liliana just hated going to see Francois because she had seen him just yesterday, and today she has to see him again. It was torture, but she was powerless here, now that it was getting to that point. Liliana decided that she would just ask her sister to buy the grape juice she wanted to drink. And so they came to a beautiful cafe with an English smile on Francois's face. Liliana was sitting at a separate table, and she really wanted grape juice, only they gave her something completely different and made her drink it. They said it was supposed to be like that, but grape juice shouldn't be bubbling. As it is, Liliana agreed to come here and see this scary one. Now the sister claims that if you drink this drink, your health will get better. And this is actually opinion-inspiring. Liliana did not believe that when she drank it, she would rise healthy. The nurse was very persuasive. She said that any medicine that has a positive effect on the body will be unpalatable. You just have to be patient for a little while. Amelia is recognized as a mage who holds sacred powers in Travancia, and is also a scholar of supernatural abilities. For this reason, Liliana often finds herself in situations where magic must be dealt with. She knows exactly what's mixed in here. This potion contains Francois's magic, and that's why Liliana didn't want to drink that vile liquid. Amelia tried to talk her sister into it, promising that she would buy whatever she wanted, but Lily didn't want anything, and Amelia forcefully made her sister just drink it in a volley. Liliana was very disgusted. This mash didn't even smell like grapes, but still she decided to take one sip. As soon as this horror touched her tongue, Liliana began to choke and realized that she would definitely not be able to drink it. However, if the beginning is made, it must be finished. So very quickly, Amelia began to pour the potion directly into her sister. Liliana resisted. She didn't even want to become healthy, just so she wouldn't drink this horror, and it was all like torture. And now there was just a little bit left. Liliana was just begging not to drink it. She'd rather die than drink this nasty stuff. Just silently watching Amelia try to deal with her little sister. It eventually got to the point where Liliana cried, got angry, and said she hated her sister. That made Amelia stop for a second. Those words were serious. Liliana took advantage of the moment and grabbed the plate of sweets and ran to another table, then continued to cry. If Liliana had originally known what this was going to be, there was no way she would have gone with Amelia. That disgusting potion taste made her feel like she was about to throw up. Amelia walked over to her sister and started apologizing to calm her down. Lily just turned away. She thought she could never forgive her sister. And then a plate of delicious cake was placed on the table right in front of her. Francois decided to find an approach to the little girl. He put her this cake as an apology and to make her feel better. He wanted to make up. Liliana had fallen for his looks again, forgetting what kind of man he was. And now that they were so close, she could get a better look at him. But his sweet smile didn't have a long effect on her. No matter how handsome he was, she was still angry. Liliana was sure he couldn't bribe her with his pretty face and cake. Francois realized he had to come up with something else, and with just a flick of his finger, he used magic to create a cute creature. This squirrel made of sunshine started playing with Lily, so the mood lifted again. Francois again suggested to Liliana that Liliana should reconcile with her uncle and sister, and she, under the influence of emotion, said yes. Only then did I realize that I had answered without thinking, and it wasn't supposed to be like that. She had already turned to tell him it was a mistake, but at that moment he just put the cake in her mouth. He started talking about how it was made from a magical structure, and then he started praising Liliana for being able to drink it, so the girl could forget the offense. Amelia breathed a sigh of relief. Francois had said that the little girl might have side effects because it was the first time she had asked for his magic, and if she started to feel bad or run a fever, they should just give her the medicine. Amelia had asked Francois to check on Liliana at least once a week while he was here on business. It was part of the contract. Most importantly, Francois wanted Liliana to grow up healthy, except when he said it, he looked very creepy. Back home, Liliana still remembered Francois's expression. It looked so frightening even though he seemed to be saying kind words. Liliana went to check on her sister Regina. Her whole room was full of dresses because Regina was going somewhere. She asked her sister which dress was the better choice of the two, even though they both looked perfect on her. Amelia quickly went into the room to see where Regina was going. The younger one said she was going to meet a man, but Amelia was so surprised because Regina had gone on dates 100 times. But for some reason right now she was worried about what she would be wearing. Regina has honey-colored hair. It's very rare and beautiful, and her eyes are beautiful, like diamonds. Unlike her older sister who wasn't interested in romance, Regina liked it. Maybe someday she would meet a good man, and all the men, in an attempt to interest her, even gave gifts in hopes of winning her heart. But Regina didn't pay much attention to them. This time she surprisingly looks excited because she's going on a date with a decent man with nice looks and personality. Liliana only found out later that her sister was going on a date with Leopold, the main character. Lily couldn't even imagine such a development. After the outbreak of war between the Empire and Trania, Leopold and Alice acted as commanders of their nations. After a hard-fought game, Trania still lost, and the man who took Alice's life was none other than Leopold. That was why Liliana rejoiced. After all, if her sister and Leopold reconcile, then maybe her older sister will be safe even if war does break out. It's just a great chance. Liliana fully supported Regina and wished her happiness with Leopold. Amelia didn't understand who they were talking about and why they were so happy. Liliana even started to run a fever out of joy, so they had to give her medicine. It turned out to be a common occurrence during the day. But even after she drank the medicine, it didn't get better. And that same night, it ended with Regina carrying Lily to the local clinic on her back. Even after the medication, the condition still worsened. Liliana was so excited about her sister's date, but now Regina looked so worried. If she worried about her sister all night, she wouldn't be able to make it to Leopold's meeting. Liliana felt guilty that she kept getting sick all the time, but there was nothing she could do about it. And so the next day, sadly came home with a bouquet of flowers. Marius inquired about what had happened and was shocked when he learned that Regina hadn't shown up for the meeting. The last time they had seen her, the first day they met, Regina had learned that he had no fiancé or wife. He was completely single, and she was glad. Then the little sister cried, so Regina ran to comfort her. But lastly, she arranged with Leopold to meet at the cafe in 3 days at 2 o'clock. He was very happy about it and prepared for the meeting, even though he doesn't know much about girls. Regina shouldn't have asked a man she was interested in such questions, and invited him to a meeting. Leopold didn't know what exactly had happened, and thought he was mistaken himself, and probably not interesting at all. His feeling was that his sister had just taken Regina by surprise, because she hadn't shown up even after 3 hours of waiting. Marius tried to reassure his friend. After all, they had only seen each other once, but it still didn't change anything for Leopold. Answer: she had already ignited a feeling in him. To distract his friend, Marius reminded him that the Trania guide would be arriving soon, and he needed to be ready. They decided to move to the hotel for safety. While they were packing, they discussed Francois. Why had he come here a few days early? He was supposed to come here to bring the 5th allegiance, but he didn't seem to be the type to come so early. I wonder what kind of business he's busy with. The Emperor said not to blabber about personal matters, though he actually recognized the reason. He was just pretending. There was a knock at the door, and immediately realizing it was the guide, Leopold went to open the door to say hello. Quickly put all my stuff down and hurried off to meet the guide. They both shook hands and the girl greeted them. She would now be responsible for their safety. At first, Marius noticed what her lessons were, and then when he raised his gaze and looked at the girl, he immediately realized who she was. This is Alice Berchio, a senior inspector in the Security Bureau of the Trovancia Maritime Police. This woman was simply incredible and beautiful. Marius thought her voice would be as cold as her appearance, but to his surprise, her voice was quite soft and pleasant. Marius mentioned Argentinus, whom he had met a few days ago, and how she had shown him around the city. Surprisingly, in that time, he had already gotten to know almost all of Berchio's family, and the bonus was that Leopold had almost gone on a date with the security inspector's younger sister. Leo tensed at the mere mention of Regina's name. Then, taking all their things, they went into the wagon and drove off. Each one was thinking of his own. The emperor was thinking of Berchio's family. It is the most prestigious political family in Travancia and has produced many politicians. When war breaks out, all of them, despite their gender, are recruited for military service and join the front lines, which speaks of their rich history. Sending a direct heir capable of single-handedly defending the emperor signifies Travancia's sincerity towards him. Marius asked Liliana, "Is everything all right?" The girl was surprised that the emperor knew the younger sister as well, not just Regina. She said that her younger sister had been running a high fever for several days in a row and had to be hospitalized. Regina and another sister are now with Liliana. Hearing this, Leopold was relieved and happy. After all, he hadn't been rejected, and that was good enough. But it turns out Liliana's really sick. I wish she was all right in the morning and closer to night. It's a shame to reach her again, and all the sisters were very worried. Alice suggested a change of subject and asked the emperor, "What do you think of Travancia?" He liked it very much. He had heard that there were many beautiful girls here, and it turned out to be true. But because of Alice, he found himself in a quandary. He originally came to make a marriage based on political considerations alone, but everyone is so beautiful it's hard to make a choice. Alice had only heard rumors that the emperor had prepared a soul pledge, a powerful magic that made up the hearts of witnesses and participants, to break if the vow was broken as part of the peace agreement, but she didn't think he intended to make a poetic marriage. The emperor felt it was the best option, and besides, mixing blood would create a long-lasting bond. He asked Alice to recommend someone. Since the emperor proposed a political marriage without giving any advance notice, it should be a girl who thinks in the same directions as him. It would be good if she was from a prestigious political family. Alice analyzed the emperor's words carefully, and his voice was so playful, simple, yet sometimes serious. However, she is confident that he is the one who has risen to the top in 15 years, with the blood of his brothers in his hand, and Odessa is undaunted by the feeling that if she lets her guard down, her opponent will tear her apart. And so the emperor finally said that Alice was not a bad option, in his opinion. She finally realized that she had been this man's target all along. Born from a political family that won't make it into the empire, in Travancia, there are only a few people capable of infusing powerful abilities into the royal bloodline. Except Alice wasn't about to agree so easily. It depends on what the emperor has to offer her, because Alice isn't really that simple. The final dawn. Liliana could hear her twin sisters fighting. Regina was sure that her younger sister was suffering because she had met this Francois, and she didn't believe that magic could really help. And Amelia just asked to trust and wait a bit because it was just an adaptation process. Liliana distantly heard her sisters fighting. She felt bad enough, and her sisters made her want to cry. Every time she barely opened her eyes, she saw her sister sitting next to her and crying quietly, shaking her hands. She looked so sad, and Liliana reached out to take her hand, but it was as if her sister didn't see it. Liliana wanted to get well so her sisters would stop crying and fighting. And with these thoughts, she slept a lot and ate a lot of hospital food. And eventually, after some time, she was safely discharged and was on her way to the playground on her own. Though of course Amelia was going to see her little sister off, Lily just ran off on her own, thinking she was old enough to go alone. Then, Liliana remembered that Regina never got to go on her date with Leopold. Since Rebecca, the protagonist of the novel, is dead, the original story will never begin again, and things will unfold in a very different way. Even if the war starts for political reasons, and anything could happen, it seems unlikely that a fatal story like the original will actually happen. In that case, Liliana is only interested in one thing. If the original story disappears, who will the main male characters end up forming an alliance with? Emperor Marius started the war in order to win the heroine's favor, but now that she is gone, he may fall in love with another woman. And if she desires peace, there may be no war. If the situation worsened, Francois might intervene. Liliana feared that more than anything. She hoped that the mad wizard would find a girl that would suit him better than anyone else, and not meet someone with a violent temper to keep him from going mad. And Leopold is innocent and soft-hearted, too good to sacrifice, so Lily wished him well to be with Regina. He may be modest, but he has a good heart. Leopold has the loving feelings of a teenager, even though he is an adult. Liliana was going to make an appointment with him and tell him to go out with her sister again, but she didn't know how she was going to confront him, since it seemed their roads had already parted. She didn't expect to meet the main characters so easily. As soon as she arrived at the playground, she ran into them. They immediately started asking how she was feeling because they knew about how sick she was. But she was fine now. Regina was very tired after days and nights spent in the hospital while she was watching over her little sister. So now she just wanted to sleep. But on top of that, she was also restless about something, and Alice noticed it. Regina revealed that she seems to like that man more than she thought she did, because now all those thoughts are all butchered. Leopold is someone she met by chance. In fact, from a personality point of view, he was not the right type for Regina, because she had always preferred people who could hold a conversation to those who were withdrawn. As for looks, Regina had always liked gentle and refined men like Francois. But then, when come to think of it, and she heard Leopold's soft voice as he got closer, and he's the only one who blushes in response to anything she says, it wouldn't get out of her head. He asked if she could give him another chance to meet her, and while there was nothing unusual about the question, Cleo was simple and sincere. Maybe that was what had gotten Regina hooked. She decided that if they were destined for each other by fate after all, they would meet again someday. It was already time for Alice to leave for work, but as soon as she opened the front door, she saw Liliana. It had been so long since she had seen her favorite big sister that she immediately gave her a big hug. The sisters didn't understand why Lily was back so early, since she wanted to go to the playground. And then Regina suddenly noticed that Lily hadn't come in alone, and Leo had been around the whole time. He was already blushing all over her, and when she ran into his eyes, she blushed. I mean, wow! But then she came to her senses abruptly, realizing she was still in her pajamas. She hadn't even showered yet, and her hair was more disheveled. It was very embarrassing to appear in front of such a man like that, so she immediately ran away. Liliana began to tell them that Leo and Marius and her friends, they were lost and hungry. They also said they didn't have any money, so she brought them here to her house. Marius hadn't thought he would meet Alice under such circumstances, but he seemed only too happy about it and joked as always. But she was beautiful in his eyes. Alice didn't look happy at all, and when she saw this emperor, she only felt heavy. Liliana waited for her sisters to get ready, and then they all went for a walk together. They came to the restaurant to eat. Liliana decided to take matters into her own hands and seated Leopold right next to Regina. Quietly, she told him that Regina really liked the lilacs, and he thanked her. All the way here, Liliana had deliberately held Regina or Leopold's hand. She'd been telling her sister how handsome he was, and after scrutinizing her sister's reaction, she realized it was already safe to start. This is certainly the green light of their love. If Leopold becomes Lily's son-in-law, the sudden onset of war will be lessened and the chances of Sister Alice surviving will increase. Since Leopold is possessive, he won't make Regina swim. They would be a very harmonious family. And when they have a baby, Liliana will be an aunt. She was thinking about it so much that she didn't notice Alice and Marius already sat down next to her. He noticed and immediately realized what Liliana was planning, and offered her, by the way, to be Cupid not only for Regina, but also for her older sister. Saying that, he looked straight into his eyes and didn't really like it. Emily, meanwhile, had gone about her business. She went to the National Library, but she did not expect to see Francois there. It was his first time in this country, and of course it was interesting to read all the books on supernatural powers. That's every magician's dream. That's why he's here. Amelia noticed that he had shown great interest in the field of healing magic, so she could recommend him a book better than the one he had chosen. This library was huge, so it was difficult to navigate without a companion or experienced reader. Amelia had found the very best book she could definitely recommend to such an intelligent mage. She was quite knowledgeable on the subject, though calming and cleansing didn't really interest her, but she still read a great many books on the subject, and was surprised to see that Francois was also interested in it, for he had read the same book she had once read. They began to discuss it, and Amelia realized what it was like to talk about something you were comfortable with, the feeling that everything was already there. Whenever they'd seen each other up to this point, Francois had been somehow tense and pretended to always worry about Lily. So she found him about 7 books and could recommend more, but foreigners can borrow no more than 8 books from the library. Amelia had one more place to visit, so she said goodbye to Francois, but he stopped her. Since she was helping him, he wanted to give her a treat as a thank you, but she still refused. He put on his English smile and suggested that she at least have a business dinner to cement a good relationship. So she agreed. Francois will even be pleased. Amelia is smart enough to maintain a constructive dialogue. Moreover, she is local and well aware of how things work in Travansia. She's a talent he wanted to keep around, basically the perfect match. But the most important thing about the original reason is that she is the sister of Andrea Bercio. with whom Francois made a deal not too long ago. It was very easy to win a man's heart, and Francois was sure that it was worth it to add a drop of warmth to his smile and invite him to dinner. And here Amelia would already fall for him. He was sure there was no exception, only Amelia. As if she didn't see his charm, she felt only disgust. It seemed to her that this smile, even yours, was unpleasant. She'd been wanting to correct a few things about Francois for a while now. First, she asked to be called Mila, and most importantly, she said he wasn't her type at all. So even if he acts like it, it's pointless, and he'd better not waste his energy trying to seduce. Either he'll tell her straight up what he wants and they'll mutually use each other, or he'll continue to waste time on seduction that won't work on her. Francois is going to be really surprised. Here, even the small maneuvers were not interesting to watch. Only his eyes were full of contempt, and at the end, Amelia also said that he looked pathetic. Francois realized that she didn't like her at all, and it wouldn't be easy to win her heart. After all, she was Andrea's sister. Sometime later, when they met for a so-called business dinner, Francois was once again convinced that his artificial methods of flirting did not work on her. She is a peculiar girl, and it is very rare to meet such people. It becomes problematic. He noticed a girl sitting at a table behind her and decided to try his charm on her. This girl immediately blushed and became embarrassed, even though her boyfriend was nearby. All in all, it was clear that Francois's charm was fully working. It's just that Amelia is weird. He tried to figure out what exactly was wrong, and looking at Amelia again, he saw the disgust on her face. She was begging him to stop doing that. It made her nauseous when he made that face in front of her. Not only was his charm not working on this girl, even if Francois tried to stop, she would likely hit back even harder. When he finally realized everything, he was relieved, because now he no longer needed to make a good person out of himself. So he decided and finally made a joke, saying that Amelia looked like a sunfish. It wasn't a good joke, and it wasn't with the right person. Years later, he would regret calling Amelia that, but that's another story.